Welcome, everybody, to the Brian Fultis Behavioral Finance Podcast. My name is Dr. Brian Fultis, and I'm an associate professor of finance at Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'm here to help you learn about behavioral finance so that you can make better decisions with life and with your money. Today, we're going to be talking about understanding retirement savings and looking at how we might be able to improve retirement building plans and our pension plans from a design standpoint. So thanks for watching, everybody, and hope you enjoy the content today. As we are recording today, you are talking or listening to a newly married man. I've got, if you see my ring here on the YouTube feed, got my wedding ring on as I just got married this past weekend. So I am a very happy, lucky man to be married, and we went and eloped over this past weekend right here in town. That means we kind of learned from some of our mistakes and some of our experiences. So one of those things that I talk to my students about is having this predisposition of what marriage or what a wedding looks like and the money that goes into it. So part of what we are learning about in behavioral finance is how money grows and how we have these trade-offs between consumption and saving. Well, we could just do some math and say, I try to tell my students, look, take it from me, somebody who's now a few years deeper into life than they are, looking back and trying to tell you this. If you could go back and have your parents or whoever, your in-laws, whoever were paying for the wedding, have them write you a check instead for whatever they think that's going to cost. That's $10,000, $20,000. Write that check, invest it, and then go do your own thing. And I know somebody might push back and say, oh, well, I want to party with my family and friends. Perfect. Go do it. Take some of that money, have a party, and go crazy. That's totally fine. Take a little bit of that, but then do the ceremony. There are many, many ways to keep this wedding budget under control. And so, of course, the second time around, as we're planning this, we didn't really even want to plan much. We decided to just go elope, but we also we had an official, and we gave him a gift certificate to the spa. We had a photographer who did a phenomenal job, and we paid her $300. And then we went out to dinner with my two boys, her, the official, and the photographer, 6 of us. And most money I ever spent at a restaurant came out to be just over $400 with tip. So we're around $1,000, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And we'll take whatever money else that we saved. I already bought the tickets to go on our honeymoon to Italy over the Christmas, New Year's break. So that's my semester break. We're going to take about 2 weeks to do that. And we're going to build out our southern Italy, Amalfi Coast honeymoon. So if I had to give you any advice on how to do that, we already know that if you took $20,000 and invested it, you're basically assuring yourself to be millionaires within 30 or 40 years based on your rate of growth. And many people overlook this because in their minds they have this predisposition of what their wedding's going to look like. And it's always way more expensive and way more stressful than anybody thinks. And I'm just going to stand in the side and say there is an alternative. And this kind of follows on the back of what we talked about in the last podcast, social norms, where there's these unspoken rules that we somehow have to follow and everybody else is doing this. And we concluded, no, that's not necessarily true. We do have the power to override this and to make better decisions, but we have to somehow buck the trend and not always follow what the crowd is doing. A little soapboxy here right away, but I am really excited. If you're watching the video, there's Mandy over my shoulder, and it was really interesting as we were dating and starting to get serious, our money conversations. And I'm going to have her on the podcast here in a few weeks to talk about this and what it was like for her. I can share my story and how we've come to our understanding and our agreement and essentially building our financial plans together now as a partnership. But I just know that she said on our first date that when I told her that I was a finance professor, she thought in her mind, this will never work. It's very cute, but this will never work. And I'm happy to say that I proved her wrong. But you'll need to hear that from her, and you'll be able to see the better half of our dynamic on a future podcast. Today, though, we're talking about retirement savings behavior and retirement plan design. And we're going to notice here, this is a story of we've got a vast majority of people who are not saving anything or they're not saving enough. And then you have on the other side, we'll talk about them a little bit. You actually have some people on the other side who are saving too much and are not living life to their fullest because they're saving too much. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you think about perfect economics, the perfect decision maker when it comes to saving, in an ideal world, you're fully rational decision maker. You know exactly how much you need to save for the exact amount of time. And then we call this the accumulation stage. So you're accumulating money as you're working and saving. And then you reach that peak where you retire or start moving into something else, may not bring in income, but you're just moving into what we call the decumulation phase, where you're starting to peel off some of your savings. This is your retired life. This is what we picture in our minds. Every day is on the beach with our cocktail and life is great. And in our models, when we think about these rational people, in our models, we follow this perfect path where we have just enough saved and we know all the costs involved with life. There's nothing that's going to surprise us. And our last dollar that we're spending is simultaneous with our last breath that we take. I'm out of money. I've perfectly ended my life as a perfect model of savings and consumption. My last breath, I give up my last penny. Now, obviously, we know that that's not true. And we followed this path so far from what the model would say we should. And most of us fall low on this side. And then some of us actually fall a little bit higher on this, where we're dying as penny pinchers to our dying day. And we've saved our money in order to live this retired life. And so you work your ass off for 40 years, 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s in order to get to 60s. But by the time you've done this and you've saved all your money, done everything you're supposed to do, well, you've had 2 heart attacks because you made yourself stressed out from the last 40 years. You've got a bum hip because you've been sitting at your desk for 60 hours a week for the last 40 years. And you're not going to enjoy what you've saved for. Therefore, we have to think about balance. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. Try to find that right balance. So anyway, let's get into this definition-wise. If we look at, there's 2 different types. There's what we call defined benefit plans and defined contribution plans. The defined benefit plans, these are the old school fixed income. These are like the old pension plans. Well, being from Michigan, I know a lot of family members who work for GM or Ford. These are some of the last pension plans. My dad was a teacher in the state of Michigan, and he, I think, had a little pension as well. But this is essentially what you would put money into as you are working. You would make contributions, but then by the time you retire, you are going to be paid out a certain amount every year. So the benefit is defined. You know exactly how much you are going to get each month or year on your pension or retirement plan. That's the way it used to be. And basically, the employer would take care of your retirement and at least give you a known amount per month or per year, as long as you follow the rules and pay into your plan. Well, now those are gone, and the onus has shifted from the employer to the employee, because now we have defined contribution plans, and this is where we normally see, most of us have these, where the employee pays into their plans. And so that is known, it is defined, our contributions are defined. And then on the tail end, we, the employees, will use our discretion as to how much we are going to take out in retirement every month or every year. Lots of flexibility and lots of benefits from this if you do it the right way, and lots of downfalls, because what we were learning here is with retirement savings, there are no do-overs. You can't get to the age of 65 and say, oh, I wish I would have done that better or more. By that time, it's too late and you have no good options. And it's hard. One of the challenges we face is, how do you get a 20 or a 25-year-old individual motivated enough to think about them as a 60 or 65-year-old? And I know we don't want to think about being old, or we don't want to think about winding down. We're in our 20s and we're lively, we have energy, we're living for today. And so I understand the challenge that we need to figure out, how do we plan for that while we're still young? We're going to talk about a couple of different ideas around that and how we could get people to save more by thinking a little bit differently. So there's a little education that goes into it. That's part of behavioral finance. And then there's also some new ways that I've been thinking about to frame things in order to help people rethink how much they're spending or try to save a little bit more money. As we said, though, many or most people don't save enough. You look at the numbers of, I don't know if you see this on Yahoo Finance or Bloomberg or wherever you're finding your personal finance information. You see two different numbers when it talks about retirement savings. They say the average number for a 32 to 61-year-old retirement balance. The average number, it's about 101,500. So these are working account balances if you're 32 to 61 years old. You'd think to yourself, okay, that's not bad. On average, it's 101,000. So that means that 101,000, yeah. In my mind, you go, well, at least 50% of people have $101,000 in their retirement account. But then you have to rethink and go, no, this is the average. The median number account balance for 32 to 61-year-olds is 17,000. The median number says the 50th percentile is 17,000. So what that says is 0 to 50%. 50% of the people have $0 to $17,000 in their retirement accounts. The other 50% have more than 17,000, and the average indicates that there's a tail. So there are some people that's bringing that average number up, some people on the high end of that spectrum taking that number up. So there's a little group of people doing very well, and then there's everybody else who's not failing. And you want to know what the trickiest part about trying to teach behavioral finance or personal finance is, and even managing money. People with money, a financial advisor, they get paid off of money that they are overseeing. Therefore, the small group of people are the best served individuals as well, because financial advisors have monetary incentives to assist people with money. So you have this group doing phenomenal, and then there's everybody else. And there's not a ton of incentives for people to educate or assist. And so you see this mentality of nobody's here to help, there's not a lot, and it just stays in this spot where you have 50% of people with $17,000 or less, and then you have a good chunk of people that are still way behind on their proper retirement savings. And like I said, there are no do-overs for this. And what we're trying to do is, that's part of what I'm doing here, is educating people for free on a podcast and on the YouTube, just to give people an idea of free education. If you want it, come and take free education and learn a little bit and start building your knowledge. So with a little bit of knowledge, we can start changing some of our behaviors once we identify what we don't even know that we're doing wrong. So we're going to talk here today also about reasons we don't save. Reasons that we don't save. And we can think about our own reasons of why we would put it off. And that's one of the things. That's procrastination. Procrastination is one of the reasons that we don't save. And there's always this, I'll start saving later, or I'll push it off and I'll do it later. When it comes to retirement savings, I'll fill out the paperwork later. And we all know now that that's a death blow. When you have all this paperwork, that's the one thing that'll slide through the cracks, and you'll go 5 years and realize that you haven't made any contributions to your retirement account. So the procrastination, and then there's also this lack of self-control. And I haven't really dug too deep into it. So my sense is there's a sense of entitlement. There's a sense of not really paying attention. So you see this a lot in people making high incomes, and they have a high income, and so they say, well, can I afford it? Yes, I can afford it. Can I afford it? Yes, I can afford it. And they start building up all these bills and all of these different things. And I know life is expensive. Kids are expensive, and we want to give the kids the very best experiences. Sometimes we really get that out of proportion, where we realize, oh my God, I'm spending $180,000 for my kids to go to this grand preschool so they can learn letters and colors and whatever faster than anybody else. And they're going backwards financially, but these golden children somehow are going to be the golden gooses or something. So we have this distorted view, but there's this real sense of, if I can afford it, I'm going to do it. And it takes you backwards. There's no prioritizing some of our expenses and understanding that we love our kids more than anything, but my kids most likely aren't going to pay for my retirement. So when I have to think about how I'm going to prioritize my savings, we have to be selfish. We have to put ourselves first before we start saving for our kids. Now, some of you might not like hearing that, but until you can come up with your own document saying that, hey, I'll I'll pay for your college first as long as you pay for my retirement. You could build a document, have that notarized with your kids, then go for it. Now you can switch the roles around. But for everybody else, we really need to think about having our long-term savings, our short-term savings, our own investments, and then the 529 plans can come below that. And I'm still an advocate of putting, here in Indiana, we get up to $5,000. You'll get 20% kickback for state taxes. That's $1,000 back in a refund. And in my world of finance, I don't know of any other risk-free 20% returns. So we're going to try to leverage that as much as possible in the state of Indiana. But I know that's different for each state. So yeah, the lack of self-control. I want it all and I want it now. That's what I have in my notes. That's my queen quote for the day. I want it all and I want it now. And people have that mentality and how they spend their money. It's like, man, this is not kindergarten anymore. We're grown-ass adults. We have to think about just prioritizing some of our expenses. And we just can't have everything all the time. When we were kids, yeah, we eat our Oreo cookies and we black out and don't eat. But when we're adults, we need to. Anyway, well, I'll back off here. Another one here. We call this the status quo bias. When we start a job, and this is where when we start talking about plan to sign, if we automatically enroll employees that are new to a company in a 401k account, they stick with the status quo. And that's what we learned as retirement plan designers. Let's just change the default to opt in the whole time. And you can always get out, but you'd have to work towards getting out for your retirement contributions. And the old default, though, used to be you had to do a bunch of paperwork. And I remember starting my jobs, filling out all the paperwork. And even for somebody in finance, that's a bit tedious and cumbersome and a little bit overwhelming because you have all these other things going on. So it's no surprise why you can see that falling through the cracks and you say, oh, I'll just do it later. And you just stick with whatever you were given on your first day of work. That's the status quo bias. And that's where we said we're just going to change the default to being in. Reason number one was procrastination and self-control. So we talked about all the different manifestations of that. Number two is what we've talked about before. This is our information overload and inertia. Information overload kind of goes in with this status quo. Remember all that paperwork that you have, filling out new forms. Once you get that list of all of your retirement investment options, you see that big stack or that big long list. And we said anything over 20 starts leading to more and more inaction. And we call this lack of participation. I'm not going to participate, or I'm going to do it later. And usually after 20, somebody recognizes I'm in over my head, and either I need to seek some assistance on this, or I'm just going to shove it under the pile, and it's going to start collecting dust from here on out. That's typically what I've seen, because people come to me with financial advice and they want some assistance, and that's what I usually see. Anything over 20, they're doing well all the way until that point when they have to make that decision, and that's where they stop and go, shit, I don't know what to do. That's the information overload. And the question I ask, and we can pop in the comments if you're still hanging out here, how often do you think you should change your retirement allocation? Retirement allocation. So hopefully we know by now that when you are younger, you can be more aggressive because with the ebbs and flow of the market, you have time to recover. So if the market goes down by 50%, that's fine because you just contribute more and you're buying it at a 50% discount. Over time, you know that's going to grow. Well, if you're 60, you need to become more conservative because you don't want your whole portfolio taking a 40% or 50% discount, that could put you in a position where you were ready to retire and now you're not ready to retire based on market fluctuations. So you want to be more conservative, put more in fixed income and bonds and other more safe assets like that. And so the question though is, how often should you change your portfolio allocation over your career? And we get a lot of different answers. I would argue that if you tweaked it once a year, just reevaluate it once a year, you can take some of those, you can do the rebalancing is what we call it, rebalance back to your original allocation, which could either be 100 minus your age in stocks. So if you're using that principle, 100 minus 42, it would be about 58% in stocks and the other in fixed income. If you like to use the 120 minus your age, that's kind of where I'm at. That means 120 minus 42 would be 78% in stocks and 22 in bonds. So I think last time I checked, that one's about 70-30 in my retirement allocation. And it gives you an opportunity every year to readjust your age. But then also, if you had a particularly good year in stocks, you're going to move that out. It's going to change your allocation. If you have a great year in stocks, suddenly you look at your portfolio and it's higher than what your objective is. So you would just move that into fixed income or vice versa. But the average amount of times that people, or the median, so this is our 50%, the median amount of times people change their asset allocation over their entire career is 0. So the median, so 50% not changing it, and they're probably the ones who have less than 17,000, so there's not a ton to change, and they're just not doing anything to help themselves in any significant way. So the majority of investors will never change their retirement asset allocation over time. And there's also what we talk about here, this task. The task seems too difficult. So we're starting to talk about these underserved individuals who don't have a great support system. Most likely they don't have a financial advisor, because what financial advisor would want to help somebody that has an account balance of 10,000? I know there are some, but we really need to figure out how we can assist these individuals. And one of the things that I think about, especially as you're trying to grow a small business and you go on YouTube and you're trying to start a podcast and you're doing all these new initiatives and you're starting from the ground level 0. And you think to yourself, just as somebody who doesn't have any savings, I want to be a millionaire. Or if you're starting a business, I want to grow my business to 1 million subscribers or followers or $1 million. And you go, well, I'm at 0 now. How do I go? And you start seeing the results, but they're so freaking slow. And you're going, okay, well, I got to 50 and now it's growing, but it's just not fast enough. I don't have the patience for this. Everyone else is doing great. You see all these subscribers and all the views and everyone has money. And here I am just stuck at the starting line. Well, here's what I want you to think about. We talked about this before, but how many times do you need to double your money before you become a millionaire? And we went through that. So let's just say we start with 1, because if you start Instagram or YouTube or any investing, you can always come up with $1. You can subscribe to yourself if you wanted to, follow yourself. Find one. Now we say, how many times do we need to double that number in order to get to 1 million? So, all right, we're at 1. So 1 time would be 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. So 32 is 5. 5 times doubled. 32 is 5 times doubled. Let's continue. 64, 128, 256, 5, 12, 1,024. That's 10 times. On we go. And I might start cutting some corners here for math purposes. 1,024, that's 10, goes to 2,048. We have 4,092. And then we get 8,184. And then 16,000, 32,000. 32,000 is 15. From there, 16 is 64, 128, 256,000. 19 times is 512,000. And then 20 times is our 1 million mark. That's 1,024,000. 20 times. We realize how things will grow. And I find it really interesting because I'm going through this myself, trying to think myself through this and not get too down, not get too high. I'm just here to provide a service. I'm trying to do what I feel called to do and assist people and let the numbers just take care of themselves, let them speak for themselves. Try not to get ego involved in that. But if I'm struggling with that, I need to go back and go, look, out of 20 times that something needs to double, just getting to 32 is 1/4 of the way. That's 5 times doubled out of 20 times. And if you continue that path, you move towards, I get to 64. Now I'm 30% of the way there. I get to 128, 35% of the way there. And it's no surprise that 1,024 is halfway to 1 million when we considered how many times it doubles. You think about YouTube's algorithm. I don't know a ton about it, but I know that once you get 1,000 subscribers, that is when you open the door to all the new advertising revenue, and you can do a number of different things. It's almost as if you've jumped the hurdle. And once you've jumped that hurdle from your first 1,000 subscribers, all of a sudden the slope is more or less greased. And so if somebody out there having multi-thousands or million subscribers, chime in and let me know if I'm talking out of my ass here, or if I'm making sense. But once you see that 1,000 hit, all of a sudden that momentum starts, and it just becomes those last 500,000 subscribers or followers or what $1 million become easy, natural. And if you have $500,000 invested, that you don't have to save any more. You just need time on your side. And if you're making 10%, basically have 7 to 8 years before you that'll double. And so the work is done. You don't have to do any more work. All that momentum is on your side. Same thing with anything else. And that's where I'm trying to get people to say, if I can get people to save that first $1,000, get that $1,000. Let's set that aside. Just start that process and then reflect back and go, okay, what did you do to get that $1,000? Because now we're going to try to come up with that next $1,000. Once that happens, how do you get the next one? And all of a sudden, it's built into your life. You're starting to see the progress. And now with your investments and with interest being earned, it's starting to grease. And that will propel you into it. And mentally, you have hope. You think to yourself, no, I'm following this process. I can see this happening, and I'm going to continue to plug along instead of going, this is way too hard. I only have 1,000. If you think about it this way, if you get to 1,000 and you say, I've got 1,000, now I need 999 more in order to become a millionaire, how encouraged are you to keep going? I know I wouldn't be if I had that thought process or my mindset was that way. But instead, if we get to 1,000, we've jumped a major hurdle. The YouTube algorithm knows this, but we're halfway there. We just need to continue to work on doubling our savings or whatever we're pursuing. I hope this is helping somebody and trying to encourage somebody, whatever your savings goal is, just get it started. Just start moving the needle a little bit and think of it in terms of trying to double. And let me know what happens. But my sense is, and I know this is helping me even trying to grow a business, keep going. Just keep going. Get up. Do your best every day. Move the needle. Just move the needle. And things will start working in your favor. I know with my own finances, I'm further in the process where you can just kind of set it and forget it. That's not what I'm doing, but you're already on your way to being a millionaire. So anyway, that's number 2. So the reasons we don't save. Number 1, procrastination and self-control. Number 2, information overload and inertia. So inertia is just sticking with whatever you've already done. And I think we are going to continue our conversation next. And on the next podcast, we'll put a pin in it for now and come back and continue this conversation. Just as I would if we were in class, we kind of reached that stopping point, and we'll pick up and resume everything the next week. This part of what I'm talking about today is a loose framework for what I will be speaking about in my first keynote, which is now in a couple of months. And it's called Why People Don't Save and Why Some People Save Too Much. And we're going to continue this conversation. But if you are looking for somebody to speak at your group or congregation or your conference, please think about this married guy and who teaches behavioral finance, because all of this is trying to move us into making better decisions in life and with our finances, is what I say at the beginning of every show. And I do mean that wholeheartedly. So whatever I can do to serve you, let me know. If you want to have any questions, leave a comment below. Please subscribe. Speaking of getting to moving the needle little by little, please make sure you subscribe. And you can see me on Instagram, Brian Fultus. You can check me out at brianfultus.com. And I'm always happy to assist, as long as you're not trying to sell me some crypto bullshit. I got a couple, right? Where I thought I was trying to help somebody and they tried to turn it on me and they tried to sell me crypto. So that's why I'm a little bit salty about it. But as long as you're not doing that, I would love to talk to you and hear from you. So thanks, everybody. I hope you're doing very well. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and hope you come back next Tuesday for our continued conversation on retirement savings. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye.